And David Bohm, in his book Wholeness in the Implicate Order, talked about something to do with artwork. And I was thinking about how mine is art words. And instead of a work of art, it's a work of words. Because really, it's all to do with language and how we use language, or how it's using us. So the products of our measure are our insights. So in a way, our brain has this algorithm of thought, of measuring with thought, or measuring as insight. It wouldn't even be measuring with insight. It would be seeing insights and creating new sounds. It just seems like the words we speak are really important, and not in terms of programs, but whatever is outside that. And I wrote down that a thought as words contains within it the image. So the words and the image arise together. And I feel like it's possible within a perception or an insight. It contains the entire perception and insight. So if I saw some kind of relationship between something that I was looking at, and it came in the form of a sentence of words, and I said those words, in those words contains the whole perception encoded in it, subtly. It's almost like a hologram of deprogramming, whereas the thought is a hologram of programming. It's sort of like the negation of programming. If someone hears an insight, I have no idea. So thought consciousness is like speaking about XYZ. And insight consciousness is speaking as perception, as the mind. The mind uses the brain to speak instead of thought using the brain to speak. There is a virtual meality in the brain, and I feel like hearing an insight and really hearing it erases some of the virtual meality. And it seems that thought was needed to create things, but then when we turn those creations into some kind of commerce and economy, then somebody has to own these things. So there has to be a me there to own these things. So there's some kind of ownership in this whole me, and really we've been sort of bought and sold. And David Bohm mentioned something about language function, and that just made me think of, we're all suffering from language dysfunction. There's nobody that has a mental illness. We're just all suffering from language dysfunction. We've been using language to create me. And then a separate me, when there is no such thing, is going to create suffering. And the suffering is because we're separate. But we've created that with our language. So this next part was key. David Bohm said something about to take a step in what might be an unending experimentation with language and with thought. This is so huge because in a way, the self-dialogue is an experimentation with language, talking to oneself in different ways about this particular thing. And I have talked about language along the way. And he also said, an experimentation with language as a normal function of the individual and society. So part of my experiment is speaking as the moment and speaking as insight. And even where I am now, there's seemingly some resistance to that way of speaking. People want to speak as me. It almost feels like when this happens and I have to like take meds or something, then I start to speak the language of me more so again, like, oh, I am tired and I'm not feeling the greatest. So in a way, it's almost like the body takes a hit in order for the person to be like, oh yeah, there is this me there that needs this and that and has certain needs. But yeah, to take a step in what might be an unending experimentation with language, because we don't question the language we're using. And I remember when I was in the psych ward one time, people were around me saying stuff, and everything people said sounded painful. They were just saying benign stuff, but every word just had this awful feeling in it. And I just take that as a sense of the way we use language and the energy behind it. And then he said, the ordinary mode of language doesn't properly call attention to its own function, which is fragmentation, so that the divisions in the language structure are then projected as if they were fragments corresponding to actual breaks in what is. That is so profound. And I wrote, this is how the me is created, because we speak about the me and as the me when there is no me. Our language structure creates the me, the subject, which is an illusion of language, an optical illusion of language. Just speak as perception, as Gaia, as the remedy. One can't bring order to the me as it is an illusion of language. And it also gives the illusion of a controller. We are controlled by our images, thoughts, and language. And again, this optical illusion of language. So I say, I feel, and that creates this feeling molecule, and that changes how I see the world based on a feeling that I call I feel. But that whole process is not real. It fragments us from the actual totality of what is. So our language creates the me. It's in the structure of our language, which is sound. And those sounds of I this and I that make us feel like there is an I. And there are no subjects, there are just objects. And these objects can be instruments of Gaia, speaking as Gaia. And David Bohm says, give attention to the very language that is being used from moment to moment in the inquiry into the function of language itself. And I feel like this could be the next bit of investigation, is the use of language itself. I'm curious about what David Bohm has to say about it, because he's quite the genius. I'm using today as a catch-up video day, even though I'm kind of groggy. But the good thing about being groggy is that I won't have too many more extra things that I want to say. I'll just sort of get through what it is that I already wrote down, even though it's in a less than energetic way. And I think I mentioned I did order the Hearty nutritional supplement that has nutrition for the brain, and I'm hoping it'll help me with some of these extracurricular activities going on in my mind, especially when I try to go to sleep at night. My body wants to go to sleep and consciousness wants to go swimming in the ocean, apparently. I saw some beautiful fish and stuff, and I really just wanted to go to sleep. So I will be taking that, because even though it might somewhat force me to reduce my medications, it doesn't seem like the medications are really keeping this in check right now, unless I take extra. So I did do that. And also another thing I've been doing a little bit is reading some of the old things I wrote 6 years ago when all this first started. And oddly enough, so much of what I wrote is what I'm saying now, or related to what I'm saying now. So it kind of shows me that whatever I was seeing back then, or however I was seeing, is the same. There's even stuff in there that's kind of premonitory when I consider what has happened since. So it's kind of neat to read through some of it. And I've been meaning to read this bit of Krishnamurti's talk. And it's a talk he gave in 1956. And it really makes me feel like what he speaks of is very similar to the process of map consciousness, or whatever you want to call it. He says, "There is a reality. Please listen. There is a reality which, coming upon the mind, transforms it. You don't have to do a thing. It operates. It functions. It has a being of its own. But the mind must feel it, must know it, and not speculate, not have all kinds of ideas about it. A mind that is seeking it will never find it. But there is that state, unquestionably. In saying this, I am not speculating, nor am I saying it as an experience of yesterday. It is so. There is that state, and if you have it, you will find everything is possible, because that is creation, that is love, that is compassion. But you cannot come to it through any means, through any book, through any guru or organization. Do please realize that you cannot come to it through any means. No meditation will lead you to it. When you realize that no sanctions, no patterns of behavior, no guru, no book, no organization, no authority can lead you to that state, you've already got it. Then you will find that the mind is merely an instrument of that creation. And it is that creation operating through the mind that will bring about a totally different world. Not the planned world of the politician or the religious social reformer. Because that creation is its own reality, its own eternity. Just think about that first sentence. There is a reality which, coming upon the mind, transforms it. You don't have to do a thing. It operates. It functions. It has a being of its own. Now, to me, that sounds a little bit like being touched by what is thought of to be called mania. Something that touches the mind, that operates and has a being of its own. And when it's there, we don't question it. And I think part of the trouble is that when that is operating, one is different from one's usual self. And people start to question, and then that being gets transformed into something that it's not because of what happens to it. And now I'm going to talk about some of my notes in my computer, because I'm sitting here in my room. And I might just go through them kind of fast just to say them. When the noise of the nervous system is quiet, there is choiceless awareness. The noise is choice. The interference pattern of noise moves us out of contact with reality. Then we are in contact with the mind, and it uses the brain to create itself. That one's actually related to the quote I read by Krishnamurti. And we talk so much about frameworks, needing a framework for this or that or some kind of system. But when we really think about it, our only framework is our body. When we remove everything else, we have just our body, and that's really what needs to be the measure of things for us. And in a way, if we're having all these thoughts in our head, we're actually out of alignment with something. It's a warning signal. And I feel like the sound of our voice moves us out of touch with actual reality. Or the sound of our voice is related to emotions, and emotions are matter. And in a way, I feel like the sound of our voice creates the matter of emotions, which creates the matter of our body. If we didn't have emotions to separate us by way of me this and me that, then perhaps we would just be consciousness disembodied. So in a way, maybe we came here to have this experience of me, and trying to stop the me, maybe that's the problem. That's actually totally opposite of everything I've been saying all along. So I wonder if I can play the role of me better and stronger to keep myself embodied. Because maybe if the me is over, then the game here in physical reality is over. And there's something about knowing beyond cognition, knowing with all the senses. And when we're in touch with all the senses, we can touch more of reality. So we might be able to sense what it's like to be a blade of grass by looking at it. And by sensing that, we might say, I am the blade of grass, which makes us sound crazy. But really it's just I'm sensing what it might be like to be a blade of grass, which is being able to empathize with anything, which is really just having the brain able to make that calculation and be able to measure what it is like to be that blade of grass. Can we allow anything to touch our nervous system? And when there's no me there blocking it, no sound in our nervous system, it can sense the relationship between our nervous system and the blade of grass. And that's complete sanity, because if we can sense that, we're not going to think that grass is evil and we need to destroy all the grass. And I wrote down that sound coming out of the nervous system produces cortisol. I think when consciousness tries to leave the body, it produces cortisol. So the body responds in order to call consciousness back to the body. So in a way, consciousness leaving the body could be a type of fishing or harvesting. And then when it comes back, if there was no stress response, it might just keep going. And I feel like when one is in touch with the mind, the feedback is in relationship with others. So there'll be a living response. So instead of having to think, oh, I wonder what happened there, did they think this or did they think that? One is just silent and waits for the living response, if there is one. And the feedback is immediate in reality instead of in abstractions in our mind. And I wonder if this is synchronicity, just synchronizing with life and the feedback of life. And so one can get in tune with what life wants and what the totality wants. And synchronizing implies oneness, and it's challenging to get into that oneness because one is bumping into people in dual consciousness. Not many people are acting out of oneness.